Welcome to your deep dive.
Oh,
Today, we're going to unpack something you probably never even think about.
okay.
Pelvis and chest sway in the golf swing.
All right.
You sent over some clips
Yeah.
from a Sportsbox AI webinar with Dr. Phil Cheatham
Mm-hmm.
and golf instructor Terry Rawls.
Yep.
And let me tell you,
Oh, yeah.
this stuff is fascinating.
It is.
We always hear about rotation in the golf swing, but
Oh,
it
yeah.
turns out these subtle shifts side to side are a huge part of generating power and consistency.
It's like a secret ingredient
Oh.
the pros use that's almost invisible to the naked eye.
Wow.
But when you break it down with technology like Sportsbox AI,
Yeah.
you can see how these tiny movements make a world of difference.
So the webinar talked about measuring the sway in inches.
Yeah.
How far the pelvis and chest move side to side throughout the swing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this thing called the sway gap,
Right.
which is the difference in position between the two.
Yep.
What exactly does that tell us?
Well, think of it like this.
Okay.
You know how everyone talks about the X factor?
Yeah.
That separation between the hips and shoulders?
Mm-hmm.
The sway gap is kind of like a linear version of that.
I see.
It reveals a lot about how a golfer transfers their weight,
Okay.
the angle of their swing plane, and ultimately how they hit the ball.
They even had these cool visuals called sway trackers
Right.
on the Sportsbox AI app that literally trace the movement of the pelvis and chest.
Okay.
They analyzed everyone from Tiger Woods to Phil Mickelson
Oh, cool.
to up-and-comers like Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the differences and similarities between their swings.
And what's really interesting
Yeah.
is how grip strength plays a role.
Interesting.
You see, golfers with stronger grips tend to have a larger sway gap in their backswing.
Oh.
It creates this counter swivel motion that helps them shallow the club
Mm-hmm.
and hit the ball with a rightward bias.
Okay.
On the other hand, golfers with weaker grips
Yeah.
might even move their upper body slightly towards the target in the backswing.
Hmm.
It all comes down to how they're using their body to generate power.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me.
Oh, yeah.
They talked about these 100% truths,
Okay.
things that all the pros do,
Right.
no matter how different their swings look.
Interesting.
Like 100% of pros sway their chest towards the target at the top of the backswing,
Huh.
and 100% sway away with their chest at the downswing,
Mm.
right around when the club is horizontal and at impact.
Yeah.
Mind.
Pretty wild.
Gone.
Those 100% truths are so important
I could see that.
because they highlight these fundamental movements
Yeah.
that are crucial for generating consistent power,
Right.
regardless of a golfer's individual style.
Okay.
And get this,
Yeah.
these movements are happening before impact.
Whoa.
It really emphasizes how important the entire swing sequence is,
Makes sense.
not just what happens at the moment you hit the ball.
That's such a good point.
Right.
We tend to focus so much on that split second of impact,
Mm-hmm.
but really it's everything leading up to it that sets us up for success.
Exactly.
And speaking of sequence,
Okay.
they brought up this term,
Yeah.
the linear kinematic sequence,
Mhm.
which basically describes the timing of all the different movements in the swing.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It starts with the sway,
Okay.
then the pelvis rotates,
Gotcha.
then the chest rotates,
Mm.
and so on.
Yeah.
It's like a chain reaction
Right.
where each link plays a critical role.
And they said that the timing of that sway towards the target in the downswing
Oh, yeah.
is particularly important.
Totally.
Apparently, a lot of amateur golfers wait too long to shift their weight,
Such a common problem.
which can lead to those steep swings and inconsistent shots that plague us all.
That's so frustrating.
They actually had some really great tips for improving our own sway.
Oh, good.
Rawls stressed the importance of matching your upper body pivot to your grip strength. So stronger grip, more upper body movement to the right in the backswing, and vice versa.
Right.
He also emphasized feeling that shift towards the target early in the downswing,
Yeah.
even before your arms finish the backswing.
That's key.
It's about getting that lower body moving
Yes.
while the upper body is still loading up,
Exactly.
creating separation and setting up the rest of the kinematic sequence.
So important.
They even mentioned using a step drill to help train that early weight shift.
That's a good one.
Imagine stepping towards the target with your lead foot as you start the downswing.
Right.
It's like you're actively pulling yourself towards the target.
Exactly.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork
Yeah.
for understanding sway and why it matters.
Okay.
But the real fun starts
Oh,
when we see how this plays out
right.
in the swings of different golfers.
Totally.
They did some deep dives on some big names.
Right.
Let's start with Tony Finau.
Okay.
They zeroed out their measurements right at the moment his club starts to move back.
Gotcha.
What stood out to you about his sway?
Honestly,
Yeah,
the first thing I noticed was how minimal it was.
I noticed that too.
Both his pelvis and chest stayed pretty centered.
Yep.
And what was really interesting was that he starts moving back towards the target really early.
Right.
Like even before his club reaches parallel to the ground.
You're right.
They even pointed out that you can already see Finau moving towards the target
I saw that.
when his club is horizontal during the backswing.
Yeah.
So he's initiating that shift really early on.
It's like he's already setting himself up to explode towards the target, even while he's still loading up in the backswing.
Exactly.
And they used Finau's swing to illustrate what they called a normal sway pattern.
Makes sense.
He loads onto his trail leg in the backswing, swaying away from the target, then shifts toward the target before the top of his swing. Then he stabilizes on his lead leg just before impact and finishes the swing.
And it's important to remember
Yeah.
that this is just one example of a good sway pattern.
Right.
There's no single perfect way to sway.
Right. They made that very clear.
Yeah.
It's about finding what works for you and your unique swing style.
Now let's move on to Stewart Cink.
Okay.
He sets up with more right side bend
Yeah.
and a very strong grip. How did that affect his sway?
Well, because of his grip and setup,
Yeah.
he creates a bigger pelvis gap at the top of his swing.
Interesting.
So his upper body is farther behind the ball
Okay.
than his lower body.
Right. They measured that gap at nearly an inch.
Wow.
They called it a counter swivel motion.
And what I found fascinating
Yeah.
was that as Cink transitions into the downswing, his pelvis and chest move together towards the target.
It's like a synchronized movement.
Yeah.
And it's a sign of efficient weight transfer and sequencing.
And then as he moves through impact, that gap increases again as he pushes off his lead leg.
Okay.
And his upper body moves farther away from the target.
They explained that this is partly due to the force of the club,
I see.
pulling his upper body away from the target during the downswing,
Interesting.
especially as he pushes off his lead leg.
It's incredible how these seemingly small movements can have such a big impact on the entire swing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it really highlights how everything is connected.
Okay.
Now let's look at a player who has a much weaker grip. Matt Wolff.
All right.
They pointed out that Wolff's club face-to-hand relationship is quite weak.
Okay.
What Dr. Cheatham called an open face grip.
Interesting.
How did that impact his sway?
Well, his sway is almost the opposite of what we saw with Cink.
Yeah.
As Wolff starts his backswing, his upper body actually moves towards the target,
Wow.
while his lower body is going in the opposite direction.
It's like he's doing everything in reverse.
Yeah.
His upper body is actually ahead of his lower body at the top of the backswing.
Crazy.
It's a great example of how grip strength can really influence your sway pattern.
And they pointed out that he maintains this unusual sway relationship
Right.
as he transitions into his downswing. But since he has a weaker grip,
Okay.
he actually ends up with a smaller sway gap. So
thought.
he moves through impact
Gotcha.
compared to someone like Cink.
So it seems like there's a correlation
Yeah.
between grip strength and sway gap size.
What is it?
Stronger grip, larger gap, weaker grip, smaller gap.
It definitely seems that way.
Now, are you ready for something really different?
Oh, yeah, hippie.
They analyzed Aaron Badley,
Okay.
who's known for his stack and tilt approach.
Ah, yes, Badley.
This is where things get really interesting.
Oh, why is that?
Because unlike most players, his lower body actually starts moving towards the target
Interesting.
extremely early in his swing.
Wow.
His upper body also shifts towards the target slightly,
Okay.
but his lower body really leads the way.
Right.
Yeah.
And they called this a front post style, as
Right.
opposed to someone like Luke Donald, who
Yeah.
we'll talk about later,
Right.
who embodies a rear post style.
And what's really cool
Yeah.
is that Badley maintains that consistent relationship
Okay.
between his pelvis and chest throughout his swing.
Interesting.
His sway gap remains relatively small.
And they attributed this to his unique stack and tilt approach,
Right,
which
right.
emphasizes a different weight shift pattern
Yes.
compared to more traditional swing methods.
It really highlights how a particular swing philosophy
Yeah.
can influence your sway mechanics.
Absolutely.
For sure.
It's so fascinating to see how these different approaches manifest in the swing.
Okay.
I think we need a moment to pause
Yeah, good idea.
and process all of this.
Mhm.
We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
and I'm already starting to see my own swing in a whole new light.
I know, me too. All right, ready to dive back into some more player analysis. Seeing how these patterns play out in different swings is really where it starts to click.
Definitely. It's one thing to talk about sway in theory, but seeing it in action with these top players is what makes it come alive.
Exactly. So next up, they looked at Sergio Garcia, and it was fascinating how his sway changed depending on whether he was hitting an iron or a wood. With his irons, his sway pattern is very minimal. Both his upper and lower body stay pretty centered throughout his swing.
They called this front post golfing, where there's very little sway towards the trail side during the backswing. Makes sense for irons, where you're often trying to hit down on the ball.
Right. But with his driver, it's a different story. While his backswing sway is still minimal, he creates a much larger sway gap during the downswing. His upper body really shifts back behind the ball.
They speculated that this might be because he teased the ball up higher, with the driver requiring a steeper angle of attack and that extra pushback motion.
It's like he's using that extra space to really load up and launch the ball. Now get ready for this. Scotty Scheffler's sway pattern is almost the opposite of what many instructors teach.
Yeah, when I saw this, I was like, wait, is he doing it backward? With his irons, Scheffler moves toward the target with both his upper and lower body very early in the downswing.
It's almost like he's getting to his front foot way ahead of schedule.
They called this a stacked position, where the upper and lower body are almost directly on top of each other. Totally different from a player like Sink, who creates that big counter swivel.
And what's amazing is that Scheffler still manages to shallow out his club and hit the ball really high, even with that forward weight shift.
Yeah.
They think this is partly due to his unique footwork and his ability to lift his upper body as he swings through.
It just goes to show you there are many ways to swing a golf club effectively.
And with his driver, Scheffler has a similar pattern, moving toward his front foot early in the downswing and keeping that sway gap pretty small.
Although they did notice his driver swing has a slightly larger sway towards the target at impact, probably because he's trying to launch the ball higher.
Next, they looked at Bryson DeChambeau. Now keep in mind, this was before he made those big swing changes to increase his distance. So this analysis reflects his old swing.
Back when he was merely a long hitter instead of a super long hitter.
Exactly. At that time, DeChambeau, much like Scheffler, moved toward the target early in the downswing, with both his upper and lower body maintaining that stacked position.
They said it was one of the most extreme examples of early forward sway they had seen.
They attributed it to his focus on hitting up on the ball. Now, how about another strong grip player? Corey Connors.
Connors! They showed how his strong grip leads to a bigger sway gap in the backswing, that classic counter swivel motion.
But even though he starts with that larger sway gap, his pelvis and chest still move beautifully together towards the target as he transitions into his downswing.
It's a great example of how you can have a lot of movement in your swing but still maintain that good sequencing and timing.
Then Rawls shifted gears a bit and shared some insights from his own teaching experience, using a student named Frederick Limbaum as an example.
Limbaum also had a strong grip, but exhibited that front post style where his lower body moved towards the target early.
It's an unusual combination that led to some issues with his swing direction and ball flight. Low left shots with a tendency to hook.
So Rawls worked with him to adjust his sway pattern, encouraging his pelvis to move more to the left in the downswing while keeping his upper body moving more to the right.
That's a common adjustment for front post golfers with strong grips.
The goal was to create a more pronounced sway gap, helping Limbaum shallow out his club and hit the ball higher and straighter.
And it worked. The analysis showed Limbaum implemented the changes successfully, and his ball flight improved. It's a great example of how understanding these sway patterns can lead to targeted adjustments that actually make a difference.
It really shows how this isn't just theoretical stuff, it's directly applicable to improving your game.
Exactly. Now, last but not least, we have Patrick Cantlay. He has a very strong grip, but unlike many strong grip players, he tends to stay relatively centered throughout his swing. His sway gap stays pretty small.
But they pointed out that Cantlay does a lot of work with his upper body to shallow out his club and create a powerful release. That results in a dynamic increase in his sway gap as he comes through the ball.
It's like he's storing up energy and then unleashing it all at once.
So even without a huge sway gap in the backswing, he still manages to generate tons of power and control. It really makes you think about how all these different pieces of the swing work together.
It's like a puzzle. And sway is just one piece, but it's a crucial one.
Yeah.
Now, beyond looking at individual players, they also talk about the broader implications of sway for everyday golfers like you and me. Rawls mentioned that most of us tend to be too steep in our downswing, which leads to inconsistent contact and less power.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that. I can see now how understanding and adjusting my sway pattern could be a game changer.
Rawls emphasized matching your upper body pivot to your grip strength. Stronger grip means more upper body movement away from the target in the backswing, and vice versa.
And we've got to get that lower body moving toward the target early in the downswing. They said most amateur golfers wait too long to shift their weight, throwing off their timing and causing those steep swings.
They even suggested drills like that step drill to help train that early weight shift.
I'm definitely going to try that. It's about feeling that lower body move toward the target while the arms are still going back, creating that separation and setting up the rest of the kinematic sequence.
Right. And they talked about how important it is to recognize your own physical limitations and adjust your swing accordingly. Like if you struggle to create a large sway gap because of flexibility issues, you might close your stance to compensate.
It's about working with what you've got and finding what works best for you.
They wrapped things up talking about the relationship between sway and clubhead speed. Rawls said getting to your front foot at the right time is essential for generating power.
He said if you try to create speed off your back foot, you're missing out on a huge source of power.
And he emphasized that understanding your sway gap in relation to your grip strength is crucial for optimizing your mechanics and maximizing distance.
This has been a real eye-opener. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand how all these different pieces of the swing fit together.
Me too. We've covered a ton of information, so let's take a moment to really process it all and then come back to discuss some of the key takeaways and how you can apply them to your own game.
Sounds like a plan. I need a minute to let it all sink in. This stuff is really making me think. Okay, I think I've finally wrapped my head around all that incredible information about sway mechanics. It's amazing how something so subtle
It is.
can have such a huge impact on the golf swing.
Huge, yeah.
One of the biggest aha moments for me was those 100% truths they talked about.
Right.
100% of pros sway their chest toward the target at the top of the backswing and 100% sway away with their chest during the downswing. It really highlights that.
Yeah.
No matter how unique a golfer's swing might look,
Yeah.
there are certain fundamental movements
Totally.
that are essential for generating power and consistency.
It's like there's this underlying blueprint for a powerful swing.
Oh, yeah.
And sway plays a key role in that blueprint.
Interesting.
And the fact that those movements are happening before impact
Right.
really emphasizes
Yeah.
how crucial the entire swing sequence is.
That's what I was thinking.
It's not just about what happens at the moment of impact. It's about building up to that moment with the right movements
Right.
and the right order.
And that's where the linear kinematic sequence comes in.
Exactly.
Sway, then pelvic rotation, then chest rotation.
Exactly.
It's like a carefully choreographed dance where each step sets up the next.
And if you mess up the timing
Oh, yeah.
of one step,
Right.
the whole sequence can fall apart.
Makes sense.
They said that a lot of amateur golfers struggle with the timing of that sway toward the target in the downswing.
Yeah.
We tend to wait too long to shift our weight,
I do that.
which leads to those steep, inconsistent swings
Oh, yes.
we're always trying to fix.
So how can we work on getting that timing right? The step drill they mentioned,
Oh, yeah,
which sounds like a great place to start.
definitely.
Imagine stepping towards the target with your lead foot as you start the downswing.
Right?
It's a great way to train that feeling
Yeah, I
of
think so.
shifting your weight early and getting your lower body moving
Mm-hmm.
while your upper body's still loading up.
Exactly.
It's all about creating that separation
Yeah.
and setting up the rest of the kinematic sequence.
Another thing that really stood out to me
Oh, yeah. What's that?
was the relationship between grip strength and sway patterns.
Right.
It makes sense now that I think about it,
Yeah.
but I never really connected those dots before.
It's a subtle but important connection.
It is.
Stronger grip, more upper body movement to the right in the backswing.
Right.
Weaker grip, less movement.
It all comes down to how you're using your body
I see.
to create leverage and generate power.
And they stress that there's no one perfect way to sway.
No, not at all.
Different players with different grip strengths and swing styles will have different sway patterns.
For sure.
The key is finding what works best for you
Exactly.
and your unique physical characteristics.
Like with those front post and rear post styles they talked about badly
Yeah.
with his minimal front post sway,
Right.
and someone like Luke Donald with his more pronounced rear post sway.
Right.
Both incredibly talented golfers,
Mm-hmm.
but with completely different approaches to weight shift.
What was your biggest takeaway from all of this? I feel like I've learned so much about the mechanics of the swing,
You too.
but I'm also curious about how you see this applying to the mental game.
For me,
Yeah.
it's the reminder that the golf swing is
Mhm.
this incredibly complex and dynamic system.
Oh, for sure.
There are so many different pieces that have to work together in harmony.
Right.
And sway is just one of those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But when you understand how sway fits into the bigger picture,
Yeah,
it can really help you simplify things
I can see that.
and focus on the fundamentals.
It's like you're not just flailing at the ball, you're actually orchestrating a sequence of movements
Exactly.
that are designed to generate power and accuracy.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that understanding
Yeah,
can give you more confidence and control over your swing.
for sure.
It's not just about hitting the ball hard.
Yay.
It's about hitting it with intention and purpose.
So as we wrap up the step dive,
Okay.
what's one key piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to improve their sway mechanics?
I would say start by paying attention
Okay.
to your grip strength
Yeah.
and how it influences your natural sway pattern.
Right.
Are you a strong grip player who tends to create a big counter swivel, or a weaker grip player who stays more centered?
Yep.
Once you understand your tendencies,
Great.
you can start experimenting with different drills and techniques
Yeah.
to find what helps you generate the most power and consistency.
And don't be afraid to seek out expert guidance from a qualified instructor.
Oh yeah, that's always a good idea.
They can help you analyze your swing, identify areas for improvement,
Right.
and create a personalized plan that works for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's amazing how those small adjustments to your sway
I know, right?
can unlock a whole new level of performance.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of the golf swing.
Awesome.
And I can't wait to put these insights into practice.
Me too. Now go out there and experiment, have fun,
Yeah.
and keep swinging.
All right, we'll see you next time.